Among Pokemon fans, even though Pokemon Horizons doesn't have Ash, and all the series that took place with him are now in the past, it seems like there's more discourse about the best Pokemon series now more than ever. While every fan of Pokemon is entitled to have their own opinion about it, there's no one that I can point to who even mentions Pokémon Black and White, let alone says it's their favorite series of the show. It almost seems like Pokemon anime fans, as a collective, have erased this series from their mind. And honestly, before making this video, I too had this insult of a series completely removed from my mind as well. Until I had a thought. We all dislike this series, but why? What made this series so bad? Or are we just used to hating it at this point? Well, after rewatching far too much of this series once again, just about half an episode, I can confidently say I know what's wrong. So that's what I'll be talking about today. What went wrong with Pokemon Black and White, and is there anything worth salvaging from this show? Before we start, remember to like and subscribe to the channel. Before diving deep into the multitude of all too noticeable problems that this series had, I think it's important to add some context behind the show. Coming off of the best series that Pokemon had made at the time, Diamond and Pearl, Ash had just made it to the top 4 of the Sinnoh League and was looking stronger than ever as a trainer. This was the furthest Ash had ever made it in a Pokemon League, and he was a strong contender for winning the whole thing, if it wasn't for public enemy number 1, Tobias. This series also was a series that took place before another Pokemon series, X and Y, just based off of being stuck between two of Pokemon's best series alone would have set the bar extremely high for any series. Anything less than stellar would be labeled as underwhelming and not on the same level as the series surrounding it. This is what happened to Pokemon Advance. The show itself was great, but as a result of being right in the middle of the original series and Diamond and Pearl, it was heavily overshadowed. However, while Pokemon Advance is overlooked, it isn't hated. This series is, and for good reason. This series is terrible, and its best moments are when the episodes feel out of place for Black and White. There were a ton of problems and letdowns surrounding this show, one of the biggest ones being Ash himself. Now, I've seen many variations of Ash, and while some of them can be annoying like Ash in Advance, they were never downright unlikable. In this series though, he is. The sentiment shared across fans is that Ash regressed in this series and felt like a little kid again. I get it from the writer's perspective. He's 10 and he doesn't age, but could you make him less oblivious and stupid? This whole series was so irritating that it becomes nearly unwatchable as you see Ash struggle with things that he already learned years ago. It makes you feel like you wasted your time watching those series beforehand, as Ash not only does not develop in this series, but he actually loses his character development he'd been building for the last 4 series. Don't get me started on Iris as well. In this series, she was undoubtedly the worst character that the Pokemon anime had ever had. She's so annoying, and her and Ash ruin almost every great idea the show has. Things don't change further into the series either. Actually, they get worse. Nothing changes in this series. It's so painful to watch more than a few episodes at a time. And who is this no-name trainer that calls himself a rival named Trip? He's a complete knockoff of Paul, except with no emotion, no skill, and no swag. It is an insult to even have him as a rival of Ash, and there's no way he beat Ash during their first meetup. I can't stand this kid at all, and the more I think about him, the worse it gets. For there to be one nail you could put into this series' coffin, it would be the Unova League. Starting off with the preliminary rounds. These rounds weren't important. You could just skip by them and you wouldn't miss a beat, especially Ash's battle against Trip. For all of the build-up that this battle had, it sucked and it wasn't even a competition. Everyone knows how Ash lost though, in a battle that was just as bad as his loss to Richie in his first Pokemon League. I mean, how do you lose to a guy named Cameron? He didn't even make it to the top 4 like last time, he fell back to only top 8. If the entire season didn't rub you the wrong way enough, I'm certain this abomination of an ending would have. If there's one thing I could salvage from the show, it would have to be this series version of Team Rocket. I just love how cold-blooded and focused Jesse and James are this season. This just brings a level of seriousness to them that makes them feel like real villains that an anime would have. The first few episodes of Indigo League held them in this light, but soon after the show gave up on this idea and just turned them into a stereotypical comedy that got annoying really fast. Team Rocket was iconic, don't get me wrong, but they got to a point where they were so predictable, they got boring. Segments with them were more likely than not just glorified filler that no one really cared about. In this series though, they have real motivations and goals. It's not just Jesse and James though, the entire Team Rocket organization takes a huge step up in this series. Beneath the main plot, there was a serious war brewing between Team Rocket and Team Plasma, but I heard rumors that these teams were supposed to face off in a full-on war, but due to a crisis in Japan, it was too controversial to air. Even without that though, this is easily the best version of Team Rocket that Pokemon has ever had. Other highlights from the series are Dawn's return to Unova, which is really cool, Charizard's return, and the subtle foreshadowing to XY and XYZ throughout the series. In fact, near the end of the show, there are glimpses of Ash acting a lot more like the XY Ash rather than the dumb Ash that was featured most of the show. To sum it all up, a lot went wrong with this series. In hindsight, it may be a little overhated, but if I had a list of Pokemon series to watch from, this would easily be my last choice. Thankfully, the greatness of XY and XYZ saved the Pokemon anime franchise from falling off. At this point, I think it's best for Pokemon anime fans to just ignore this season and move on. If you like this video, make sure to subscribe and leave this video a like. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.